I think we are good to get going with our first Pillars presentation, Track A. Welcome, everybody. And I'm going to go ahead and begin. So, good morning, everyone. I'm Carolyn Bennett-Glauda from Southeastern New York Library Resources Council, and I am on the Pillars Planning Committee. My pronouns are she, her. Thank you for joining us for this presentation, Enhancing Accessibility, 5 Strategies to Apply Tomorrow. Before we get started, I'd like to take care of some housekeeping. I'm joined by my colleague, Caitlin Kenny, who is available to help you with any technical problems you have during this presentation, and that includes sound, captioning, seeing the video, or CE certificates. If you need assistance, please drop her a line in the chat. So we'll be utilizing the chat as well as the Q&A feature for this presentation. We'd appreciate it if you would change your settings so your messages are going to everyone rather than just all panelists. You can change this by opening your chat box and clicking on the drop-down menu above the text box. So please feel free to introduce yourselves there now if you feel so inclined. You can use the Q&A feature to ask questions so they don't get lost in the chat, and you can find that towards the bottom center of your screen. As you can see, live captioning is available for this webinar. We are using a cart service for live transcription. And to toggle the subtitles on or off, you can click the live transcript button at the bottom of your screen and choose either show subtitle or hide subtitle. And as you can see, we also have American Sign Language interpreters joining us, and you should see their video on the screen next to the presenters. All attendees are expected to follow the Pillars Code of Conduct, which is outlined in the conference program. To summarize, just please treat all staff, event attendees, and speakers with respect. If there's anybody here who's not adhering to the Code of Conduct, you will be removed from the webinar. All presentations at this conference will be recorded, and a link to the recording will be shared in the next few days. So please check your email for that link. And keep an eye on the chat. About 3/4 of the way through, we will drop a link there with CE certificates. You will need to attend the live broadcast to get that link. And if you like what you're seeing and you want to share on social media, you can follow the event using the hashtag Pillars2022. And now that I've completed the housekeeping, I'd like to introduce Amber Aiken and Mary Schneider.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. We are excited to share our presentation with you today, Enhancing Accessibility, 5 Strategies to Apply Tomorrow. I'm Amber Aiken, the instructional librarian with Strayer University, and I am here with our university librarian, Mary Snyder. Before we dive into our content, we thought we would share a little bit about who we are and our experience in this virtual instruction space. I have been the instructional librarian since April 2020 with Strayer, and our instruction program is 100% virtual. We reach so many students across the country every single quarter. And so we have to be able to utilize different strategies to make our content as accessible as possible. I completed my Master of Science in Library Science in 2011, my Master of Education in Adult Education and Development in 2018, and I'm currently working to complete my Doctor of Education in Performance Improvement Leadership. Now that I've introduced myself, I will turn the mic over to Mary.
Thank you, Amber. I am Mary Snyder. My pronouns are she, her, and I am thrilled to be here with everyone. My undergrad experience was very traditional. It was the typical on-campus, in-person experience. And then I did my master's at Maryland in their first 100% online program for library science. So then when I started at Strayer about 10 years ago, I was thrilled to help usher us from this hybrid in-person online research and writing experience into a fully online experience for our students, because we have students from across our nation and actually internationally as well. Now, I've mentioned that we're from Strayer, and so has Amber, and we wanted to share a bit about who Strayer is, or what it is, I suppose. We are actually celebrating our 130th anniversary this year. We moved into the online space in the late 90s and offered fully online bachelor's programs. We have campuses up and down the East Coast and to the Midwest, and all students take online classes. Even pre-COVID, over 95% of seats, which is how many classes a student takes, were online already. And here on the slide, you see a bit more statistics and data on our typical student.
We have a packed agenda for you today, and we like to share our agenda, and this is actually part of accessibility. Sharing an agenda with your audience can help set them up for what's to come. It can help set those expectations and to help them understand what you're about to cover. This helps with wayfinding. Now, the 5 tips that we are going to offer that you can apply tomorrow or today, if you'd like, we're going to discuss setting expectations. This is both internally with your team and externally with the patrons that you serve. Next, we'll talk about offering captions and transcripts, which Pillars is doing a fantastic example of showing us what that can look like. We're going to discuss plain and inclusive language, building accessible deliverables, and of course, it doesn't stop once your presentation is over. We need to reflect and train so that we can always improve for the future. At the end of the presentation, we will look at different tools and resources to help you learn more. These slides are available, so you don't need to try to scribble them down. They will be available so that you have access to them later. We talked about setting expectations with an agenda, and I'm going to turn back over to Mary to talk more about setting expectations.
Just as our slide says, success starts before your patron even registers. One practice we like to employ is to give a comprehensive and detailed registration page so that our audience knows exactly what it's like to expect and whether or not the session fits their needs. Throughout this talk, you'll hear me use the word event. And that's actually part of what later on we'll mention about inclusive language and plain language. We call our virtual events, well, events. We don't say webinars or seminars or anything like that, because not everyone might remember those terms and where they came from, right? It's like thinking about a cord phone, a rotary phone versus a cell phone. So we use the word event when we talk about these instruction sections. I saw a comment about my sound. Is my sound all right? Okay, perfect. Thank you. So some of the items that we include on our registration pages includes learning outcomes. We also, as Amber mentioned, like to add agendas and slides when possible. So again, the patron, the student, they have the best chance to preview that content to make sure it's something that they expect to see based on the title of the session. We also include tech information, like if someone might need a mobile phone or need to join on their computer, or can only join by phone for audio, or can use their speakers. So again, your patron can be fully, prepared tech-wise to engage and hear the content. Another practice we use is having more than one staff member at a session. Just like you see here, we have a whole team to give this conference. We at Strayer have a whole team for one session. We typically have the one person giving the content, that presenter role. And then we have another person to play host, to field that Q&A session, or section. If it's a larger event, we'll even have a dedicated person to just watch chat. And we'll have someone set aside to watch for tech issues to help students troubleshoot their audio, joining sessions, and whatnot. So all of that helps that speaker focus on their content so we can start on time, end on time, and students can get that same learning, experience that they predicted based on the registration page. Just as we offer those slides up front, we also turn on captions, and caption our follow-up recordings that we share. And we share the agenda, the slides, and any transcripts as well. We don't put up messages like please request transcripts or please request or slides upon request, anything like that, because we want to remove any barriers and make that student experience as seamless as possible. So if they want it, they can click and they don't have to ask or wait. Another item that we do is we have an intro script at the start of every session, similar to what our hosts, today had. We'll highlight captions. We'll let our audience know whether they can turn them off or enlarge in them. We'll also clarify whether they're in listen only mode or how they can chat with us, whether it's to everyone or only the panelists. So again, our audience can focus on what's happening instead of spending the first 10, 15 minutes distracted by asking these questions.
Mary mentioned captions and transcripts, and I want to chat a bit more about that. Closed captions and live transcription. These are part of the second strategy. It can be helpful to consider that there are multiple use cases for captioning. We often think of captioning as an accessibility measure, and it absolutely is. However, I had an experience with a student who messaged in and said that they were having audio issues. They weren't able to hear me. I started to troubleshoot to ask, have you tried this? Is your speaker up? Have you logged out and logged back in? And instead of responding to those, they replied, oh, I'll just use the captions like I did last time. I really loved that point because it shows that the student is using the captioning, that it is clear enough and helpful, and it's something that they've done before. When they wrote, like I did last time, that let me know that this is working for them. It may also be that there's someone who's in a space where they can't have their sound turned up. So again, remove barriers, Don't try to assume why people may need it. You will also need to decide between closed captioning and live transcription. Closed captioning is typically when a human types in captions. This is one of the best ways to have captions on your presentations, but it can be cost prohibitive. The other option is live transcription. Zoom is currently using Otter AI to create live transcription. This is speech to text software. It is sometimes inaccurate, but it's less expensive. It can also be useful to check to see if the live transcription will save so that you can use that for your post-event transcripts. You'll need to vet your software options. We at Strayer use Zoom. We're using Zoom for this conference, but you may need to explore other options. We discussed Otter AI as Zoom's primary vendor, and that might work for you as well. If all else fails, PowerPoint does have captions. I'm going to turn those on for just a moment to demonstrate. When I toggle subtitles on for PowerPoint, they will begin to appear at the bottom of my screen. I've used this strategy when doing live demos. I'll put the browser at the top of my screen and make sure that the bottom gives those captions the space. This isn't ideal because sometimes captions can be distracting for some viewers, but if you don't have other options, it can be useful. I'll turn that back off. Apologies for the double captions for that moment. You also want to practice your speaking for pace and fluency. Verbal fillers don't always pick up in captions or live transcription very well, and they can be distracting to your audience. You also need to make sure that your speed is appropriate. You don't want to speak so quickly that the transcription is missing important words. As Mary discussed with the introductory script, we want to introduce students to the technical aspects of those captions. We'll explain how to turn them on or off and how to use them after the event. Once the event's over, we want to make sure that we are editing the captions for accuracy before we share that recording. We do share those recordings out with our patrons because we don't want to create the barrier of them having to ask for it. And those need to be clear. The live transcription may not be accurate, and there's not much you can do about that in the moment. However, afterward, take a bit of time to clean those up. It'll make such a big difference. Once you've cleaned them up, you might also be able to use those captions to develop your transcripts. If you've already done the work once, why not? We also want to encourage you to create descriptive transcripts. Descriptive transcripts are a bit more detailed than just a blank transcript that gives the words that were spoken. A descriptive transcript will also get into details about what was happening on the screen or other noises like chuckling from the audience or the speakers. We also recommend that you share those transcripts as Microsoft Word documents. Screen readers often have more success with Word documents than with PDF files, and that's why we recommend it. I saw that Carolyn put it into chat, but I also want to give a verbal shout out. There's a pre-recorded presentation called Captioning Your Videos for Accessibility by Jacqueline McEwen of Niagara University Library. If you want to learn more about captioning your videos, I would love for everyone to go over and check that out to be able to make your video content more accessible. Part of accessibility is using plain language, clear language, and inclusive language. I'm going to turn back over to Mary to discuss these concepts as our third strategy.
Great. Thank you. Plain language is a concept that's sometimes confused with simple language, but that is not true. Plain language is language that doesn't have flourishes and unnecessary terms and repetition in it. It is basic and clear and to the point. Here on our slide, we have a few aspects of plain language, but you're able to learn more about plain language from the Plain Language Action and Info Network, which is a group of agencies and federal, committees that have plenty of videos and content explaining it through the lens of federal agencies sharing information with residents of the US. But some parts of plain language that really resonate with us at Strayer are avoiding idioms, jargon, and acronyms and vague terms. Those can appear as barriers when students are joining our session and we start off immediately talking about Boolean operators and subject terms and other terms that need to be defined before we even dive into the content of the day. Sometimes it's necessary to use those terms, but I would challenge you to think about the times that you can use simpler terms or just avoid those phrases all over. One term that we realized was a vague term that was just so much part of our everyday was the word citation. In our team, we also manage our writing center. And so we talk with students a lot about references and in-text citations. And we realized that we were always using the word citation, regardless of if we were talking about the list at the end of your writing to add citations or the in-text citations within the body of your writing. We were calling them citations. And so it's a vague term, right? So now whenever we talk about citations, we catch ourselves and clarify which one we're talking about. Another aspect of plain language is avoiding blocks of text, avoiding paragraphs to read through and just blocks and blocks and blocks. Instead, challenging ourselves to convert those paragraphs to other ways to share that message. So bullet points, numbered lists, infographics, a chart, a picture, any way else to break up that page so it's not a traditional chunk of text. Also, pausing after questions. So whether you're working one-on-one with a student or when we're working in a group, to pause after we hear a question to really think about our answer before we give it, to make sure that it's a concise answer. So specifically meaning that we're not repeating ourselves, because that's another tenet of plain language, whether it's verbal or if it's written, is that you do not repeat yourself. And we found that that was something that we caught ourselves doing a lot. So again, when we were comprising our answers or writing our LibGuides, we realized that we could really shorten our content when we cut out how many times we might actually repeat the same idea. So those are just a few items of plain speaking and plain writing that really stuck out with our team. Inclusive language is another way that we think about how we speak during our sessions with students or how we write those slides or our LibGuides that go along with sessions, or even that registration page. The first item that I want really is you to share relates to this comic that's on the page. And I'll read aloud the comic too. So don't worry about trying to zoom in or anything. But this comic really brings out the idea that we like to act as lead learner, right? So I'll read aloud the comic now. So here on the left-hand pane, it says, I try not to make fun of people for admitting they don't know things. Because for each thing everyone knows, by the time they're adults, every day there are, on average, 10,000 people in the US hearing about it for the first time. So that's down below, we have all of that math spread out. So it's 10,000 people a day learning about something for the first time. The next panel says, if I make fun of people, I train them to not tell me when they have those moments, and I miss out on all the fun. Diet Coke and Mentos thing, what's that? Oh man, come on, we are going to the grocery store. Why? You're one of today's lucky 10,000. And I had this moment yesterday, actually. I had a colleague who was new to Strayer, new to higher ed, and we were in a meeting and we were talking about FTE, full-time enrollment. And she asked, what's FTE? And I said, you're in for a treat. Let me tell you about iPads, statistics, the national reporting agencies we have. You're just going to have so much fun. Right? So we act as lead learner. We try to avoid phrases like everyone knows this, or as you may already know, or comments about easy or simple, or this is only 5 minutes, right? Because then we find that shows to students that we're learning with them, we are with them. We use that royal we. We try to avoid saying you statements to act as our lead learner, to really encourage students in asking their questions and then thanking them for asking them and then learning with them when we give the answer. Something that's very hard, especially for me personally, is to avoid jokes because I am a jokester. Amber knows this, my team knows this. I have to resist the urge because jokes can exclude parts of your audience. I had a Latin teacher in high school who challenged us and said, every joke offends someone. And, we were sophomoric children, and every day we tried to bring in a joke that wasn't offensive and didn't, put someone in an unsavory light. And, I've never really found that joke. So this is something too, that sometimes we try to use jokes to lighten the mood or to be friendly and welcoming. And I encourage you to find other ways to do that. We also work to be mindful of intros, to make sure that we are, pronouncing names correctly of our students, that we are using the accurate pronouns. And if we're not sure, we ask. And if we say it wrong, we apologize, correct it, and move on, which flows into my next point. If at any point we say things or do things that we realize, oh my goodness, that was not the best choice, we apologize, we acknowledge it, we correct it, and we move on. Because again, our focus is on helping our students achieve those learning outcomes that we laid out in the registration page and to then apply those in their courses. So we apologize and then we just try to quickly move in. And you'll see this is a great slide of, I have been repeating myself. which is a perfect example of what not to do with plain language, right? Some of these are habits that just take time to break and to form.
We are going to talk about building accessible deliverables. This is an important part of the experience, whether you are in a virtual space as we are, or if you are in the classroom or a physical location. If you are exploring virtual ways to present content, you can review the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. We have a link to these at the end of the presentation. These provide detailed instructions on how to make your content accessible. We also use these as checklists after we've created new content. You want to consider any visibility constraints. If you have low vision participants, color contrast and size are going to be key aspects to making that content accessible. The color contrast is the difference between your main text and your background text. I was surprised to learn that different color combinations that I regularly used were not accessible. They didn't meet the WCAG guidelines. We also have some tools to help you with that. No matter what the delivery type is, look for standards for that type of content. We mentioned the WCAG. If you are using a website, maybe you're working on a library guide or other types of pathfinders. If you are creating a PDF, Adobe has an accessibility checker that you can use. However, one step as part of the accessibility checker is a manual reading order check. People often overlook this. They'll see, yes, my images have alt text, my words are picking up correctly, but without that reading order, it may come off as gibberish to your audience. If they are using a screen reader and you have not set that order, it's going to create a default, which may not convey the message that you would like. In a PDF, in a Word document, or on your website, your images always need to have alternative text. There are resources that we point to help you develop this alternative text because there are good ways and not so great ways to develop this text. As I mentioned, we will have all of this content and more as our additional information slide. Once you have created an accessible deliverable for your patrons, you're still not finished. This is only our fourth strategy. Moving into our fifth strategy, you'll want to explore reflecting and training. We take away a new lesson from every presentation. It may be something small, like perhaps I didn't like the color of that slide, or I didn't like a turn of phrase, or it may be something pretty significant, like turning on captions. We want to take those lessons and turn them into training for our teams, and I will turn back to Mary to discuss this process.
Thanks. Yes, reflecting is so important. Amber and I have worked as a team very closely together now for over 2 years, and we still chit chat about practically every session we give, every series, and Amber oversees over 200 sessions a year. So we reflect a lot. And some of our tenets are that we look for progress, not perfection. We have shared so many tips under each of these 5 strategies today that this is not something that we would undertake in one day or 1 month ourselves. We have built up this list over 2 years of partnership. So that's something that I'd ask that everyone here to think about, whether you work solo or in a team, or if you're in a role that you have leadership and influence, to look at it as progress and to think of it as habits, right? We all can make checklists all day long for when we're delivering sessions or prepping sessions, but that also takes time, and that takes up a mental load that we can't then spend on content and engaging with our students. So again, remembering that these habits form over time. Expecting to make errors. This is something that I try to share with my team. When I mess up, I share it with my team because I want them to realize that I don't expect perfection from myself and not from them. I only look for progress from our team. And a great way to really walk the walk for that and really show that to them is by showing it in my own actions. Also, listening to patrons and staff. So, not only our own team reflecting on what we thought went well, we also look at our survey data, our feedback, other departments or stakeholders who might be hearing feedback from students and then pass it along to us, because that can help guide us when there's 40 things we want to do and we need to pick one thing to focus on this month. That feedback can help us go where our students need us the most. And I just want to actually reiterate, I think now Amber and I have mentioned this for the 3rd time, is giving accurate captions in our videos. Oftentimes when we are saying the word Strayer University, sometimes it pops up as Australia. We even have a team member, Inga, that when she says her name, it pops up as anger. So things like that. We want to make sure that we're giving our students a polished and accurate experience so that not only they have a better opportunity to get that info they need, but they also feel that, respect through the accuracy and the polish that we're giving them. So training. Sometimes we think of training as when you have a team, but I'm sure that some of us may currently work as solos or maybe have in the past. Amber and I both have. And training is something that goes hand in hand with that post-event reflection process, is that we want to update our templates, our job aids, to make sure that they have the information that is accurate. We want to save those files in a commonly accessible place that everyone knows where they are. We want to name them so that everyone has the most current version, right? I think we've all seen different folders where there's downloaded versions of the same thing 5 times. And it can get messy to try to find the most accurate thing, especially when we're all learning, right? There's always another thing to improve with our instruction. I think that's something that Amber and I talk about pretty often, is that there's never really perfection. Even if we do this for 10, 15 years, there's always another way to improve for accessibility, inclusion for our students. We also set aside dedicated time each year to look over our job manuals, our checklist, our processes. We're big fans of Smartsheet. So we'll look over our Smartsheet tasks. Smartsheet is a project management tool that helps us keep on track with our team. I'll put a link to it in the chat. So we'll update the language and instructions that we have saved in that program as well. And we'll look at everything cohesively to make sure that it's internally, consistent, but also judge it against outside benchmarks. So maybe what our state agencies are giving, or what we've learned at conferences like this one. I encourage my team to spend at least 1 hour on PD every week. And, I find that we as a team, we tend to focus on the items that we're talking about in meetings. And I found that a lot of our team is really excited to learn about just another way, one more way to make their sessions more inclusive with our students. And finally, all of this sort of wraps up to know your why. This is something that we talk about a lot on our team and across Strayer, actually, is knowing your why. Why are you here? Why are you in your role? What is your motivation? Why are you doing this particular project, right? What goal are you trying to achieve personally or within work? So, with us, our why is we're trying to reach as many students, but also to make it a memorable and usable, accessible experience for them so that they walk away having learned something new. With that, pass it back to Amber for one more section before we enter Q&A.
Thanks, Mary. We've discussed a lot of different tools and resources, and we dedicated a section to learning more. First, we have additional information. These are resources to help you get more familiar with how to create more accessible presentations and content. First, another shout out to that pre-recorded Pillars session by Jacqueline McEwen. We also have a link to w3.org. This gives information on creating those descriptive transcripts. We mentioned before about using Microsoft Word instead of PDF for screen readers, and that advice comes to us from the Screen Reader Survey from WebAIM. You can access this survey to learn more about which types of screen readers are most commonly used, formats for your deliverables, and even information about preferred browsers. This information can inform your instructions to your patrons or students on how to interact with your content. Mary discussed plain language, and we have the link to that plain language action and information network. And those web content accessibility guidelines, also from w3.org. We want to be practical. We want to have tools that you can use. So we've included a few of our favorites. I love the Adobe Color Accessibility tool. This tool will check both for color contrast and for different types of visual acuity. This will make sure that your text is going to be accessible to those who need it. If you do not have a screen reader or a text-to-speech reader on your computer, there are a couple of extensions that we would recommend. These are both called Read Aloud, a text-to-speech voice reader. One is in Chrome, the other is in Firefox. Microsoft Edge has a built-in accessibility measure, but in Chrome and Firefox, which often work best with our library databases, we like to use this voice reader to check our content for accessibility. It's one thing to theoretically put the pieces together, But it's another entirely to check it in real time to see if it's working in the way that you intend. You want to maximize your reach by creating accessible, inclusive, and equitable content. We are so grateful for your time and attention. We love the participation. I've seen some comments and I see a few questions. We wanted to thank you and provide our contact information. You can reach Mary at mary.snyder@strayer.edu. And you can reach me by emailing amber.aiken@strayer.edu. Now, I do see a couple of questions. The first one is, how do you go about correcting captions for Zoom recordings? Mary, do you mind if I take this one? All right, thank you. When you have your Zoom recording available, when you go to the recording itself within Zoom, you have the option to correct those captions or the running transcript. You will pull up the view, the presenter view, and there is a little pencil icon that you can click to edit. It will scroll along with the speech. So that's how you can update both the text and the speaker, because Zoom will try to pick up the speaker. Having the speaker is another important aspect of creating accessible captions and transcripts. So Zoom does a really great job in this arena. I see the next question is, how do you record your session, or do you record your sessions whenever possible for learners who may need to hear it again or at a different speed? And I will turn this over to Mary.
Yes, thank you. Yes, we do record all of our group sessions. So when we visit a class, or if we are giving an open session that every student is invited to from the university, or if we're doing what we call program level sessions, which is when we specifically invite students of a certain degree or a concentration or a discipline. But we do record everything, and then share it out afterwards via email or with the professor or on our website. So we do just, we used to sort of switch around, but very quickly we learned, let's just record it. We have a comment in the chat. I knew how to edit them in Otter's interface, which I really like, but that was opening Zoom files in Word or Notepad, and that was a struggle to edit for upload to YouTube. Yes, thank you. If anyone has any other questions, we're happy to answer them.
I'll give everyone that like uncomfortable pause moment to type or ask, but so far it seems like you have answered people's questions. You've answered a lot of mine, I know. It was fantastic. I really do appreciate all of the work that you've put into making your information accessible to everyone. It's inspiring. It's great. Oh, I do see another question coming there from Brenda.
What is the best color background for posters and font size of letters? Ooh, having a white background with black text is normally going to be the most clear option, but it's a little bit boring. If you access that Adobe color contrast checker, it also has some recommendations that you can use. You can play around with different colors so that you're not just having to do black and white text. For the font size of letters, we try to go no smaller than 24-point font when we're looking at a slide. When we're setting up our slides, we don't want to have a wall of text. We use the 7x7 guideline, which is no more than 7 words per slide, no more than 7 lines, or no more than 7 words per line, no more than 7 lines per slide. So that helps us with having that large text. If you're looking at a print resource, it's going to be a bit different. If it's going to be a large poster, stand back and take a look at it, see if it is going to be available. But still, going with larger fonts, I would say 20 and up would be very useful. You might just have to try it and see, depending on if it's going to be a handout up close or if it's going to be something you expect people to see from far away, like a vision chart in your eye doctor's office.
We have another question here in chat, which I'd like to answer. Question is, does anyone have any info about how the accuracy of Zoom and Otter captions compare to the accuracy of captions in YouTube or even Panopto, Kaltura, or other enterprise options? Simply, which provides the most accurate captions? Well, I'm able to say from our experience at Strayer, we have used all of these captioning options and others. And, you have to edit them all. I don't think we've ever had a caption option that we didn't have to edit, just because not only are certain words difficult based on the speakers, based on your fluency, your enunciation, different tools work better for different speakers. But ultimately, we found in our experience, you always have to edit anyway. Yeah. And we have some other comments here. AI generated captions just are never accurate. Yeah. They have gotten much better, someone comments, which I definitely agree. I know specifically with, let's see, Kaltura and Zoom captions, I feel like they've done an update here in the past year because we are noticing there's certain words we don't have to constantly change. Although that may be training, who knows? Maybe it's not the software getting better. Maybe it's all of us getting better, right? So.
And don't forget PowerPoint, because PowerPoint does have the subtitling option. PowerPoint was more accurate than Zoom with Otter AI or Kaltura when we first started. But as Mary mentioned, it has gotten significantly better from those other tools as well.
All right. Any other questions? You have just another minute to drop them in the chat here. And I'll have to share a fun anecdote too after we finish the recording about the Netflix show The Circle and how, actually, I could just share it on the recording while people are asking questions. I was watching that and they all talk via speech to text, like via chat messages. And somebody was asking like, well, how fake is this show? And somebody else said, either they have the best transcription service that the chat is always correct, or the producers are in the back quickly typing exactly what they said and all of their slang and their nicknames and everything. So hopefully if somebody has invented the perfect AI, they're not just holding it for Netflix reality TV shows.
You can train some services to learn special words. If you use software like Camtasia or Captivate, you can create a personal dictionary and train it to your voice. So there are ways to make it better.
Mm-hmm.
That's good to know. Thank you.
Looks like we do have one last comment. I suppose before we end the recording, in the chat we have, if anyone needs a cost-free caption option beyond YouTube, check out webcaptioner.com. It's a shame that making content accessible often comes at a cost. So that URL is webcaptioner.com.
Thank you. And I guess I'll also take a moment to thank our sponsors who have helped us subsidize the cost of the live transcription and our American Sign Language interpreters. So thank you to our sponsors today for that. And oh, there is one more question from Caitlin at ESLN.
Yes. Oh, this is a good one. Amber, do you want this or me? Because I know we both have a lot to say about this one.
Yes. Accounting for time correcting the captions. I don't think people understand how long this can take, and building it into your job is not easy. Quite right. It can take some time. We try to mitigate that time by speaking clearly enough in the beginning that there's less to correct. But part of this is in the structure of our sessions. As Mary discussed, we have different roles in our presentations. I know that this isn't always an option. Sometimes you are solo. For us, the presenter creates the content, so they have to do a lot of front end work. The host does the back end work of developing those captions. So it's built in when we are structuring what their role will be for that presentation. And I'll let Mary add her piece as well.
Sure. Yes. Some other spins on that we've done is that we found that when we keep our sessions to 30 minutes, it's not only preferable for students, but it also saves time with the captioning because, again, we're more thoughtful with our content. We're not repeating ourselves in the spirit of plain language. So when our team, we first got in the habit of captioning, we would rotate and share that across the whole team so that everyone had a chance to learn how and build up a speed with doing it. So that with a 30-minute session, it took the typical team member no more than 60 minutes to correct the captions. Sometimes we could pull double duty and get some extra benefit out of captioning. If there was a team member who wasn't able to join that session, but wanted to learn more about it, maybe it was a database that they haven't used before or too often, or if they're a newer team member, we asked them to do captioning. So not only they could practice captioning, but also it was a mini training for them to learn the content. Another strategy we've taken is we have the presenter sometimes caption their own work. This is also in the spirit of training as well, because when you have to caption your own work, you realize how many fillers and ums and ahs you use when you speak. So then next time you'll maybe be more conscious of what you're saying, which then has to be corrected in captions. Looks like we have 2 minutes, so I think we need to end it, right, Carolyn?
Yeah, we want to transition over to the next presentation. I just wanted to say too, I love that last tip. I should listen to my own talking more to learn how to slow down. So thank you so much, Amber and Mary. This was great. The next presentation, as you mentioned, is going to start at the top of the hour in 1 minute. So if you stay here, you will be here for designing digital age learning ecosystems for ELLs, or you can jump to track B for making LibGuides more accessible through a universal design framework. And that's with Heather. So, and if you want to link to, Caitlin just put in the chat the link to track B. So thank you all so much, and we'll see you in just a minute.